Support for Australia's Prime Minister hits a record low. Indian farmers demand compensation for government land grabs. Big hopes for small programs in Asia's online future. And teams touch down in Auckland ahead of the Rugby World Cup. Good evening, Girish Sawlani with ABC News for Australia Network. A troubled backbencher and a torpedoed asylum seeker policy have dealt a severe blow to the Australian government's popularity. The latest opinion poll puts support for Prime Minister Julia Gillard at record lows. Her ministers admit the times are very tough, and at the Pacific Islands Forum in New Zealand, Ms. Gillard faced more questions about how the government plans to tackle its problems.
A trip across the Tasman to the Pacific Islands Forum provided little relief for a Prime Minister still facing intense pressure over the asylum seekers issue.
I'm not intending to raise the issue of people smuggling. Obviously, if leaders want to raise the issue with me, then I will discuss it with them.
It's a bit hard to imagine.
Opposition leader Tony Abbott has been relentless in his pursuit of Nauru as a solution.
The Prime Minister should swallow her pride. She should admit that John Howard had it essentially right on border protection.
Nauru's foreign minister says while it's not a priority, he's open to the idea.
In terms of the hosting of the centre, Nauru's done it in the past. It worked well. If it was seen to be part of future plans, we're happy to discuss that.
And Nauru is close to signing the United Nations Refugee Convention. Before leaving for Auckland, Julia Gillard wrote to the opposition leader offering a briefing on the options available in the wake of last week's High Court decision. Tony Abbott's now accepted. In recent years, Fiji's dictatorship and development issues have dominated the forum, but New Zealand's Prime Minister was today showing camaraderie on the regional challenges of asylum seekers.
I think it's worthy of the interested parties having those discussions. As I say, from New Zealand's perspective, obviously geographically we're a lot further away than Australia, but we don't think we're immune. We think there's a number of ships that have been en route to New Zealand.
Julia Gillard may be overseas, but another bad poll won't be far from her domestic deliberations.
I don't do this job as Prime Minister because I want to see it reflected in opinion polls. I do this job as Prime Minister because I want to do what's right for the nation's future.
And according to the Prime Minister's public supporters, she's still got what it takes.
Julia Gillard is tough as nails. She's up for the job because she understands the importance of these very significant reforms for the long-term national interest of this country.
The coalition is riding high and the government is pondering a dangerous vacuum in the critical policy area of asylum seekers. And while it treads water on that issue, it'll be reflecting on the fact that Julia Gillard's popularity is the lowest of any Australian Prime Minister in almost 20 years.
Land grabs by state governments in India have sparked violence and social unrest in recent years. This week, the National Parliament will begin debating a new law aimed at providing better compensation to farmers who lose their land to development. India correspondent Richard Lindell reports.
India is in the midst of the biggest building boom in its history. The pace and scale of construction is only surpassed by China, and like in China, urbanisation is dislocating millions of farmers from their land and livelihood.
When land is acquired, farmer concern is not taken. Policemen come in our houses and those threatening, pick your compensation.
Farmers are willing to sell non-fertile land, but they're demanding market rates. They were outraged when they learned the government sold their land to developers for more than 20 times the price they were paid. The farmers took their case to the High Court, which has ordered all building cease ahead of a hearing next week.
While the courts decide the outcome in Noida, a more comprehensive solution is being debated in Parliament this week. A new land acquisition bill has been talked about for years. The 2011 draft has provisions for farmers to share in profits and also takes a more holistic approach to compensation, which includes training and jobs.
Jobs and greater compensation will help in some cases, but there are hundreds of other land disputes with miners, industry and builders where locals oppose development on social and environmental grounds.
We have a lot of population, a lot of working force, and say throwing them out suddenly, you think that's sorry, you're out of this place, you're out of your homeland, you have no occupation, breeds tremendous amount of insecurity, and it cannot be good for both the economic and political stability of the nation, as simple as that.
Disputes over land are delaying projects by years and are a threat to growth, which is currently running at 8 to 9% a year.
To build a road, you need land. To expand a road from 2-lane to 4-lane or 4-lane to 6-lane, you need additional land. And where the land is going to come from, the land is going to come from the agricultural areas.
Which is likely to lead to further social unrest, as the government aims to spend $1 trillion on infrastructure over the next 5 years. Richard Lindell, ABC News, New Delhi.
India's Prime Minister Manmohan Singh has arrived in Dhaka. It's the first time an Indian leader has visited Bangladesh in more than a decade. He'll meet with the Bangladeshi Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, and they're expected to sign deals on swapping disputed territory and water rights on major shared rivers. The visit comes amid a warming of relations between the two countries following a Bangladeshi crackdown on separatists operating on India's northeastern border. A large convoy of trucks believed to be carrying Libyan soldiers has arrived in the African country of Niger. While it's not known whether Colonel Gaddafi is in the convoy, it's a further sign that his rule in Libya is over. It now seems a matter of time until the interim government can gain complete control. Negotiators are currently attempting to achieve the peaceful surrender of the few remaining towns which are still holding out, as Middle East correspondent Ann Barker reports.
The convoy, reportedly of 200 to 250 trucks, crossed Libya's southern border, passing through the northern Niger city of Agadez. It's believed that military commanders and Tuareg fighters are among those in the convoy. A spokesman for the National Transitional Council has confirmed that a convoy of at least 10 trucks is known to have crossed into Niger, carrying gold and cash taken from the central bank in Colonel Gaddafi's stronghold of Sirte. But he was unable to confirm reports of the larger convoy. There's speculation the convoy is part of a dramatic and secretly negotiated plan to spirit the embattled Libyan dictator out of the country. A spokesman for Gaddafi says the Libyan leader is still in the country, but many believe he'll join the convoy at some point.
We hope that we arrest him, but if he stays in Niger or Mali or Chad, he will cause a lot of trouble for Libyans and to the whole world. But it's closed in front of him. Where can he go? He would be arrested wherever he goes.
The convoy is now believed to be moving on to Burkina Faso, a country which has previously offered sanctuary to Colonel Gaddafi. It's thought he had been holed up in the town of Bani Walid, south of the Libyan capital, Tripoli. Interim government fighters are still massing around Bani Walid and are waiting for orders to clear the town. But the Transitional Council says they have a deal with tribal elders to allow them to peacefully enter Bani Walid. If it proves to be true, it'll be a relief for the fighters, but there's still some scepticism.
A meeting could happen this morning with the tribal leaders to convince the Gaddafi brigades to put down their weapons and enter the town peacefully. But the tribe leaders and the people are all with the revolution, and we are worried for them with the snipers. There is preliminary agreement, but we don't trust it.
With the interim government now in control of Tripoli, details about the old regime are coming to light, particularly details of its dealings with the West. Official documents discovered by the BBC in an abandoned Tripoli office show that both Britain and the United States worked closely with Colonel Gaddafi's regime right up until the uprising began in February.
Tempers have boiled over outside the trial of Hosni Mubarak in Cairo. It was orderly enough when the deposed Egyptian president arrived on a stretcher for the resumption of proceedings, but the mood soon soured among a crowd angered by a new ban on TV cameras at the trial. Riot police were deployed against the crowd of mostly anti-Mubarak protesters and family members of those killed during the spring uprising. Mubarak is accused of corruption and ordering the killings of protesters. He faces the death penalty if found guilty. You're watching ABC News for Australia Network. Coming up in the bulletin, more questions raised over the UK phone hacking scandal. And a growing taste for French wine sees prices soar in China. There's been a dramatic end to an 11-hour siege in Western Sydney. A 52-year-old man is in police custody after barricading himself and his daughter inside a legal practice in Parramatta. Police stormed the building after negotiations with the man broke down.
The siege ended when police stormed the building where the man had been holding his daughter hostage. The 12-year-old girl was heard screaming and crying out for her father before she was put into an ambulance. Minutes later, the 52-year-old man was arrested.
Negotiations have started to break down and they've deteriorated to a stage where police have taken action to break into the premises and to take a 52-year-old man into custody.
While distressed, the girl was otherwise uninjured. She's now been reunited with her family.
But I'm just happy that it was a happy ending in terms of a safe ending, that he's able to, and more importantly, my niece is able to come out safe.
With the family man, that's all I can say.
The pair had been holed up inside a barrister's office in Parramatta's central business district since 9 o'clock this morning. Nearby buildings were evacuated after the man claimed to have a bomb in his backpack. Topless and wearing a barrister's wig, he taunted police for hours. Bomb technicians are still examining the scene and the man's bag.
We've always, throughout this operation, operated on the assumption that there was an explosive device in that backpack.
Authorities say they're investigating a possible motive. The man is expected to appear in court tomorrow morning. Fiona Ellis-Jones, ABC News.
Several former News International executives have been quizzed for a second time over the News of the World phone hacking scandal. One of them said he's certain he told News International boss James Murdoch about an email which showed that hacking wasn't limited to one rogue reporter during discussions over a civil case.
It was the reason that we had to settle the case, and in order to settle the case we had to explain the case to Mr. Murdoch and get his authority to settle. So certainly it would certainly have been discussed.
The executives have also been questioned over why they paid money to an ex-employee who'd been convicted of phone hacking. More than 40 people are dead and 90 missing in the aftermath of the destruction caused by Typhoon Talas in Japan. In some areas, thousands remain stranded in urgent need of supplies.
With roads severely damaged and bridges washed away, the search for the missing continues with air support. Police, firefighters and defence forces are still picking through the rubble of collapsed homes and the banks of swollen rivers following the worst typhoon to hit Japan in 7 years. Typhoon Talas made landfall on Saturday, packing winds of 108 kilometres an hour. Most of the missing are in Wakayama on Japan's Pacific coast, where the helicopters are also needed to deliver supplies. The heavy rain dumped by Typhoon Talas triggered numerous landslides in the region, stranding thousands of people in remote villages without food and water. Around 100,000 people were advised to leave their homes, with many still in evacuation centres. Some towns are starting the clean-up, but even those leading the efforts have to deal with the trauma of missing family and friends.
I have to think about how to help the people of the town deal with this disaster. Only after that can I think about my family. I hope that I can find my wife soon to send off my family with my daughter.
Talas's aftermath will be an extra challenge for the new Prime Minister Yoshihiko Noda, sworn in a day before the storm, and another reminder of the country's vulnerability to natural disasters in a year that's heaped devastation on Japan. Timothy Pope, ABC News.
A magnitude 6.6 earthquake has struck the Indonesian island of Sumatra, killing a 12-year-old boy and causing panic in towns and cities. Hundreds of people have been evacuated to temporary shelters while authorities assess the extent of the damage. The earthquake was centered around 100 kilometers from the southwestern city of Medan at around 1 a.m. local time. The quake was too far inland to trigger a tsunami. A senior Al-Qaeda leader linked to planning attacks in Australia has been arrested in Pakistan. Yunus al-Mauritani was arrested by Pakistan's main intelligence services. 2 other senior Al-Qaeda operatives are also in custody. Al-Mauritani had been ordered by Osama bin Laden to target Australian, American and European economic interests. Growing taste for French wine is seeing prices soar in China, and vineyards in France are hoping to make the most of this year's bumper crop.
At Chateau Becherville in the south of France, they've been making wine for over 150 years, but the prices have never been so good. Soaring Chinese demand for French wine has seen some prices triple since 2008. And while China may not be traditionally a wine-drinking country, it's learning fast.
There are more wines they know, more names they recognise, not only in France, where there's a whole lot of other chateaux now that are classified but not the first growths that they're looking for, like Ducru, Beaucaillou.
Top-end consumers are prepared to pay serious money for a glass of red. 3 bottles of 1869 Lafite Rothschild recently sold at a Sotheby's auction in Hong Kong for more than $230,000 US. And at the retail level, business is growing quickly.
There's a big expansion away from the first-tier cities, Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and it's moving much further out into the secondary, tertiary cities where there's a big explosion of wine appreciation.
At this Beijing restaurant, Chinese consumers are rapidly turning to connoisseurs.
Sometimes I can guess where the wine was produced, the type of grape, or the method used to make the wine just through its features.
Back in France, a particularly wet summer this year promises an exceptional harvest at the vineyards. Good news, no doubt, for China's growing legion of wine lovers. Jessica Longbottom, ABC News.
Throughout Asia, the drive to learn English is huge, and now there is a way for the tech-savvy to get word perfect using their mobile phones.
And so, my fellow Americans,
it's a thoroughly modern way to learn English, and in the booming smartphone market, the developer thinks it's onto a winner.
In Asia, there are huge opportunities when it comes to people wanting to learn English. Take Japan, for instance. There is a whole industry there called Eikaiwa, where conversational English schools are doing very well. And we want to tap into that market, and the opportunities in China is, of course, very vast.
It's just one of the offerings on show at the Apps World Asia Trade Fair in Singapore. When it comes to app downloads, Asia is a long way behind the West, with only 20% of the market. But with around 60% of the global population, Asia is a prime target for developers. And downloads are expected to hit 2.4 billion in Asia by 2013, with industry experts saying the region's mobile internet culture will only aid its rise.
Asia has always been a mobile-first economy. All of the Southeast Asian countries in particular, the first experience for many people is of the mobile internet through their phone, through their device, and that's the way they interact with the web.
Despite Asia's reputation as a technology powerhouse, it's also lagging behind in app production, with the majority of the estimated 750,000 apps in circulation made in the West.
Yeah, I think we're looking at a developer base which is still quite small for mobile applications, particularly in Singapore. It's a major challenge to find people who can build applications in this space.
A challenge these people are working frantically to overcome. Scott Longmuir, ABC News.
To finance now, and there were more heavy falls on stock markets around the world as Europe's financial system lurched closer to crisis. Alan Kohler has the details.
Well, after what happened last night, there was no chance of a rate hike in Australia today. Basically, European bank shares were dumped as fear of a financial crisis reached fever pitch. It was sparked by statements from the head of Deutsche Bank, who remarked that it all reminded him of 2008, which was a bit alarming. So Deutsche Bank shares fell nearly 10%, and banks all over Europe saw their share prices plummet. The Frankfurt share market fell more than 5% overall, and prices on the other big European markets fell almost as much. Something similar probably would have happened on Wall Street, but was closed for Labor Day. Now here's a graph of the German index called the DAX, and as you can see, it's not just last night, it's fallen 30% in a month, which is rather shocking for the strongest economy in Europe. It's now becoming clear that most European banks are technically insolvent if they properly value the loans they've made to countries like Greece, Spain and Portugal. They don't want to do that, of course, because then they have to raise more capital, and the markets don't want to give them any. So it does feel a bit like 2008. The local market fell 1.5%, getting it back towards the August lows. Financials and banks were hardest hit because global funds were just selling any banks they could lay their hands on. AMP and Macquarie fell 4%, Westpac 2.5%. Resources stocks were sold off as well, and so were media companies like Seven, with a lot of debt. The Aussie dollar actually wasn't really sold off in the end. It was down just a little, and I think it's starting to be seen as a safe currency, or at least not as risky as some. At least our banks aren't broke. And that's finance.
And the US market has now reopened after that public holiday, with the Dow and Nasdaq both falling more than 2% in early trade. To sports now, and the US Open top seeds Novak Djokovic and Caroline Wozniacki were given fourth-round scares before progressing to the quarterfinals. While their great rivals, multiple winners Serena Williams and Roger Federer, advanced easily. Wozniacki fought back from a set down, while Djokovic had to work hard to overcome Ukrainian Alexander Dolgopolov. John Haysbell reports.
Denmark's Caroline Wozniacki has spent almost a year as the world number one, but still awaits a Grand Slam singles trophy. Her chances of a maiden win in 2011 were fading against Russian Svetlana Kuznetsova. But the 21-year-old winner of 18 women's tour titles swept the Russian aside in the third set. The former world number one, Serena Williams, closed in on what could be a fourth US Open singles crown, with a comfortable win over Serbian Ana Ivanovic.
And is into the US Open quarterfinals.
Novak Djokovic found himself locked in an uncomfortably long first set tiebreak. He won it 16-14 and went on to take the second and third sets 6-4, 6-2. He'll meet fellow Serbian Janko Tipsarevic in the quarterfinals. Roger Federer had to wait until almost midnight before taking to court, but he lost only 3 games against Argentina's Juan Monaco. Federer has confirmed he'll lead the Swiss team in next week's Davis Cup World Group Playoff against Australia in Sydney. Little children and golf tournaments usually don't mix. But American professional Webb Simpson's toddler James could be forgiven for making a fuss when his dad rolled in a long putt to stay alive in today's USPGA Tour event.
But he doesn't like it. The little babies don't like that loud noise.
Simpson made another good putt to clinch a playoff against another American, Ches Reavie. This time, young James and his mum were more subdued. Australian Jason Day was equal third. The Australian women's soccer team is on the verge of missing out on a place at the London Olympics.
This is a big chance. It's in the back of the net.
The Matildas lost 1-0 to Japan in the Asian qualification tournament in China. And the Boomers and Opals national basketball teams are hoping they can both qualify for London in their series against New Zealand.
They've developed into a great basketball country and have proved it in many ways, and I think that only lifts the level of competition.
The teams play double headers over the next 5 days in Melbourne, Brisbane and Sydney. John Haysbell, ABC News.
She just continues to tell you.
The Melbourne Storm fullback Billy Slater has won the highest individual honour for Australia's National Rugby League competition, the Dally M Medal. Slater won the award for the first time, having polled 29 votes to finish 2 ahead of the West Tigers 5'8", Benji Marshall. And he was full of praise for his fellow teammates.
It's a team sport, and no individual can go out there and perform to the best of their ability without the other 12 blokes on the field at that particular time doing their job. And that's what we're about at the Melbourne Storm, is just everyone playing their role and doing the best job that they can for the Storm.
He also scoops the Fullback of the Year award. His Melbourne Storm coach Craig Bellamy was named the league's best coach. In rugby union, the Wallabies have arrived in enemy territory, primed for World Cup action. Touching down in New Zealand, the Australians confirmed they'll be fielding an unchanged side for their opening match against Italy on Sunday. Here's New Zealand correspondent Dominic Schwartz.
Aussie, Aussie, Aussie!
There was plenty of green and gold at Auckland Airport, but were they fair dinkum fans?
Who thinks Australia's going to do well? Yeah!
And do you think they're going to win the cup?
They are really supporting Samoa and Tonga, but they're quite happy to support Australia for the day.
Particularly given the Pacific talent in the Australian lineup. Prop Sekope Kepu's sister has no problem with divided loyalties. She's a Wallaby.
I reckon they'll get to our finals and beat the All Blacks.
If the dubious nature of the fan base worried the players, they weren't showing it.
I'm just happy to see some people in Australian jerseys. Great support and cheers for all them coming out.
James O'Connor had another reason to smile today. While he's still not back in the Wallabies' starting lineup, he's out of the sin bin and on the bench for the team's match against Italy this Sunday. For Rugby World Cup first-timers, and that's most of the squad, it's exciting.
It's very special. It's one of those things that's a dream come true. And it's really important that we're not surprised by the intensity of it and the passion that every side will bring.
With the niceties almost completed, the Wallabies are keen to get down to business. The business of winning. Not friends, but the Webb Ellis Trophy. Dominique Schwartz, ABC News, Auckland.
Good luck, boys. And that's all we have for this bulletin. But for more news and current affairs from the region, visit our website at australianetworknews.com. I'm Girish Sawlani. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.